Next, we will explore how art can shape inclusive urban futures across continents. Please welcome our speaker of the session, Dr. Tammy Wong Hulbert from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, who will join us online. The topic will be Conversing with Hong Kong and Melbourne, channeling the power of art in curating inclusive cities. For those guests who prefer other language other than English, you can scan the QR code and use Wally. Hi, Tammy.
Hi, I'm sorry I interrupted then.
It's okay.
It's really lovely to be here and to be able to be here for your audience and to speak a bit more about the work I do in curating inclusive cities. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm here in Naarm, which is, you probably know as Melbourne, on Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I'm gonna get started. So many of you may know, or you may not know, that earlier in the year, Makala Dwyer and Makala is one of my colleagues here at RMIT. She's a well-known artist. She developed this very beautiful projection work that was a public artwork in Tai Kok Tsui. And it actually focused on the barn swallow, which is a bird that's a threatened species in Hong Kong. And Makala's work was drawing attention to this particular common but disappearing bird. And we actually took the opportunity to work with the community and actually engage them with the artwork. And we did that through a workshop where we actually ran, got the community to get involved in making costumes like the barns, inspired by the barn swallow, and we actually paraded them around the square. We had the Hong Kong Art School students involved as supporting the community group. And it was, for me, this was a project that was about the citizen artists actually in researching the local environment and actually embodying the environmental issues that were discussed during this period of time when the participants actually got involved. So anyway, I'll move on from that one. I wanted to actually just talk a little bit more about my background as a researcher and as an artist. And I generally say that I'm an artist and a curator and an academic, but I kind of work in three different ways. I generally make my own independent artwork, which is more sort of based around self-reflection on different issues, quite often to do with issues around migration. And as someone that comes from a migrant background in Australia, I'm actually Cantonese Chinese background. Some of my family is in Hong Kong, but they're in Hong Kong, Macau and China, all across that area. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. But I also work on socially engaged projects, which means they're projects that I work out in the community with non-professional artists, people that are in the community that are interested in art. And I also work on curatorial projects that's more with professional artists, and often it's working with artists to curate exhibitions. I also teach in this area quite extensively, but it is about presenting the work of professional artists and supporting artists. So three kind of quite different spaces that I work between. I just wanted to give you a bit about the Australian context at the moment. I'm very interested in migration and multiculturalism and social cohesion and community building and our relationship with the environment and where we are. And over the weekend, a really a terrible event happened. It was called March for Australia, and it was actually a very racist event that was anti-immigration. And as you know, Australia is well known as a very migrant-heavy, multicultural society. We've had people here in Australia of different cultural backgrounds for generations. And, you know, Australia as a colonial country was founded. We have our Aboriginal community who have been here for 65,000 years. Colonisation's generally has a short history, only over 200 years. And then we have obviously lots of different waves of migration. And it's a complex issue. It's always been challenging. The last 5 years have put a lot of pressure on communities, and I think it's erupted into this kind of protesting that's happened, which is a bit, it's not surprising, but it is, it's brought it to the surface, which I think is what has been a bit sad to see, I think, in recent days, actually. The other thing that you can see on the right side, the Chinese community and the Hong Kong community in particular have been a really great big part of Australian society for many generations. And the first people that came to Australia from Hong Kong and China were actually from, well, they would have been sailing out of Hong Kong, and they were Cantonese-speaking people from Hong Kong that came as gold rush miners back in the 1800s. So you can see that there's this irony about the protesters having yum cha lunch because, and not seeing the irony in that was an immigrant culture that's been brought here. And anyway, a lot of people were quite disturbed by the sight of protesters going to yum cha. But it's interesting because I think really Hong Kong culture is so embedded in Australian life that we forget sometimes that it's actually, or we just think of it as Australian, really. But in my own instance, my family's been in Australia for over 5 generations, and it really still influences me. My first ancestor was from a very small village in China, just near Macau, called Silchekham. It would be considered part of Greater Zhuhai now. But I went on quite a great journey in the last couple of years researching that village, which is a gorgeous little heritage listed village that's still preserved. It's about 500 years old. We spent some time there last year, and for me, that was actually a bit of a journey of actually taking ownership with all the divisive sort of discussions happening in Australia around whose land we're on. I was kind of really interested in understanding the Chinese cultural practices around clan and place and belonging. So I did a lot of research. We'd lost the connection to the village in my family, but through spending time in graveyards and at my great uncle's graveyard, and I actually rediscovered that the village that our family clan came from, and I went and visited all the Wong temples, and I recreated the Wong temple as a mobile ancestral hall so that I could carry it on my back as a performance and actually walked it across the land that I live on, which is the Dandenong Ranges Mountains, or Mount Korhan Warrable as it's known by Aboriginal owners. But that was just to give you a bit of background into who I am. But in regards to research, I usually take an action research approach to my work. And action research involves working with communities, working inside communities, understanding the dynamics of inside a community, and working with them to actually see how something works. I often do, a different sort of work with one particular community, go through that whole cycle of planning and then acting, observing, reflecting, and then replanning and acting and observing and reflecting. It's a cycle that you go through to develop your ideas. And each time you're refining that cycle. because you're understanding and you're anticipating what's going to be involved, and it gets more refined each time. You learn new things through that cycle each time. There's always new literature that I pick up on each time. Some of the literature that really influences me are things like Edward Soja's Third Spaces, which is a kind of a critique of what contemporary space is, that space is an expanded notion of space, that space contains a past and a present and a future, and it can also include an imagined idea of space. And he really focuses on urban spaces and how we should be creating a more socially just urban space. Another book that really influenced me was One Place After Another, Site-Specific Art by Mi-Won Kwon. And she really talks about site-specific practice and how she talks a lot about this idea of belonging in transience, and how a lot of artists actually do practice site-specific in a site-specific way, because they're trying to find meaning in sight. And this is a result of living in a globalized society where we are always moving and we are constantly relocating. So how do we connect to place? Artists find ways to connect through finding meaning, finding personal meaning and connecting. But another piece of literature that's really been important to me has been Mapping the Terrain, New Genre Public Art. And that was a book by Suzanne Lacey, who's an artist. And she writes a lot about public art and public art beyond the monument, and public art that considers public engagement and public concern. And that's definitely a book that's also really influenced my interest in socially engaged practice. I'm just going to talk a bit about some projects that I've developed over the years, and I've only got 3 examples, so I'll just explain a little bit about them. This is a project that I worked with the St Andrews community, which St Andrews is a small village up in, it's sort of in the northern part of Melbourne, a bit north of Melbourne. And it actually had this very small village, sort of lovely community. They were really affected by the big bushfires of 2009, big Black Saturday bushfires. The whole town actually was, the whole centre of town actually was really affected, and they had to rebuild the community centre. The community was quite traumatised in that way. So there was a lot of activities happening there that were about community building and rebuilding the community. So the centre was put there. They built the St Andrews Men's Shed. The Men's Shed is a space where men go and do activities like building things, and it's sort of like a community space that most people can join, or most men can join. It's specifically an Australian thing. And I also work with the St Andrews Historical Society. And in this case, I proposed a public art project. Is there a problem? I hear a voice. No? Okay. So what actually happened is that I did some research on this area, and at the Queenstown Cemetery, I discovered that there was actually a mining community of Cantonese miners that had been buried there in the 1860s, and they were young men that came out here to mine gold in the gold fields, but they actually never were able to return to Hong Kong and to China, where they hoped to have a fulfilling life, because the conditions were terrible in Australia at that time, and lots of terrible accidents happened, and there was also a lot of racism. There was a lot of hardship at that time, and there was about 20 particular men that were buried here that obviously did not survive. They never returned home. So I had this idea of working with the Men's Shed community to retell that story to the community through public art. And we worked on it together. We decided as a group that we were going to build these boat lanterns, which were solar powered and lit up in the evening. And we spent a lot of time in the shed designing, and I worked with these lovely men who were from the community, were really lovely and really engaged with the history. They loved learning about their local history. And they were also had experience as miners, and they were really interested in helping me develop this project. I worked with them for about 6 months. And what we ended up making was a series of 8 boats, which was actually laid out through the gardens of the community centre. And I was really inspired by the poem On a Tranquil Night, which you probably know is a very famous Li Bai poem, which speaks about besides my bed a pool of light, is it frost on the ground? I lift my eyes and see the moon. I bow my head, feeling a longing for home. You probably know the Chinese version. But of course, this is a poem that is about migration during the his travels on the Silk Road and how much he misses home. So it really influenced me to think about this idea of homesickness and wanting to return the miners that had sort of been trapped here unintentionally, that never intended to stay here. And I thought the sentiments of the poem really helped to, they influenced the sentiments of the idea of a tribute to these people and to return them. The records I found about the people were really quite, they were a bit upsetting actually, because the death inquests were quite miserable, and you can see the one at the top there. But it basically talked about someone being buried in the earth and his face was lying downwards and he was quite dead. So it wasn't very respectful what was written and what was left in the records. And I wanted to tell that story in a more poetic way. And so that's why we together built this project. This is the second project that I wanted to talk about. And I worked with this particular community of new migrants, actually. And this is after I did the project with the historical project. And these were a parent and a child that were selected from a primary school. They're all new migrants. They came from all around Asia, really, mostly from Asia. One family was from Colombia, but we had families from Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, and India. And so they were really quite a mixed group of parents and children. The school had actually identified that there was a lot of kids new migrant kids at this school that were needing a bit more extra support with sort of, I think maybe beyond home life, just connecting with new people. And some of them were in situations where their family was separated. Half their family was here, the other half was in China. I remember one of the students was really upset that her father wasn't able to be in Australia because he still had businesses back in China. And so there was a lot of sort of disruption, and I don't think she, emotionally, some of the kids were really struggling a little bit. But we worked with them over a whole term of school, and we worked extensively with them in the ceramic studio. And we built a project together, and we talked about being new immigrants. We really unpacked their positions, how they felt being in a new society, if they felt like they belonged in a new society. In particular, we worked with hands. We got interested in the idea of hands, and so we made our own hands, and we wanted to imagine connecting together. We also talked a lot about food and our places at the table, and then this became metaphoric. The connecting of the hands and the places at the table became really quite metaphoric in our work that we ended up developing, and we resolved this idea of a collaborative work all together. And we actually had a big meal to celebrate when we'd come up with the idea, which you can see there. All of the participants wanted to make their own bowls and write down what their favourite foods are, what foods gave them comfort and reminded them of home. And we ended up building an exhibition which was in 2 rooms. The front room was a lounge area, and it was like a big public living room and a big public dining room. And the front room actually had recorded their journey. Sophie Basigi is a video artist that worked with me, and she recorded them in the process of making their new world. And then in the back room, we made a huge dining table which had all their connected hands placed in the middle. And then each place was actually made by them. And they actually put their bowl there with their hands next to the bowl. And there were seats for the 22 of them. And when they weren't there, the seats were empty to kind of represent their absence in the community, because they felt like they were absent. But then also, it was also representative of bringing them together. And we were quite influenced by Judy Chicago's big dining table and the absence of women in history. And we were talking about the absence of migrant voices in the community at that stage, which is why we sort of came up with this kind of concept of the community dining room and the lounge. This is the final project that I'll talk about. It's called To the Fallen Trees. We had a huge windstorm in 2021 here in Victoria, and it devastated a lot of forest areas. I actually live in the mountain areas on the edge of Melbourne, and this is our local park where many of the trees had fallen, and then Parks Victoria had piled them up right into a huge pile. And that's actually my son there reading to the trees. We were quite devastated when the actual when actually the storms happened. And so we actually ended up building this project with a community of writers from the local area, and they wrote these really beautiful letters to the fallen trees to express their sorrow for the damage, that the environmental damage of the windstorms, which has a relationship to climate change. The windstorms are getting more wild in Victoria, and so we wanted to explore the effect of environmental damage, and also how communities actually have got a lot of anxiety. And the other thing is, this was an event. It became an event, an artwork that was part of the Big Anxiety Festival, which is a festival that deals with mental health, actually. And so anyway, over the months we worked together, and eventually the actual pile of trees got removed by the parks rangers, and it actually got burnt during the whole process. We were hoping that the tree pile would still be there, but it actually got removed. So, but we got committed to this site. So we went back to the site, and we actually read our very emotional letters, our poetic letters to an audience as a performance. And I actually worked with a photographer and a sound artist, and the sound artist actually recorded the event. And then the artifacts from the performance became kind of what we showed in exhibition. But the performance itself was its own performance. I'm just going to stop sharing. Oh, actually, I might just, hang on a sec. I might just stop sharing that. But I'm just going to, hang on, I'm just going to play. I do have a little bit of a sound file that I just wanted to play a little bit of. Just tell me if you can hear this.
When listening.
Oh, hang on. I'm going to start it from here.
Are very real for many. dear trees
Here it is.
that lay us.
Yeah.
We perform monuments in stone to outlive the bone works on foreign lands. Fallen for empire while you fell where you first laid seed. First reached for a sky that held the promise of always. Collected here, in this place of return, of slow giving back. Branch, not bone, bark, not skin. In memoriam of the unnamed, for who there is no pile of stones. Felled by a history storm with its chilled winds and erasures. No country without entanglement. Root, leaf, the veins of a raised fist. Lest we forget, lest we remember all of.
I won't play too much of it, but I can send you the file if you're interested. It's quite a long track, but it is each of the authors of the letters reading their letters of how they felt about the storm and how it affected them. And I think the other interesting thing is looking at that site, it's actually also in an area where there's a war memorial, and we were interested in how the people from the, during the war period have been memorialized, but we don't do that with nature. And so it was kind of like a public memorial for us to the damage that was done to those trees that we cared for so much. But on that note, I think I might wrap up my part. But thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share some of my projects from Australia there. And I hope they might give you some food for thought for future public art engagements. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for your sharing. Please stay with us as we will have the panel discussion shortly. Joining us on the panel, we will have Mr. Ian Learn, founder of Sophus Alliance, also consultant of the project, who's also the moderator today. And Professor Thomas Zhang, Associate Dean, Impact and Communications, Faculty of Architecture at the University of Hong Kong. Finally, we have Mr. Mike Yip from Jarvis X, creative practitioner and projection artist. Please have a round of applause to welcome them. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Jackie. Hi all. My name is Ian. It's a privilege for me to be sitting here with Thomas and Mike. Thank you both for joining our sharing with Tammy. I think Tammy has to rush to another occasion from 4 hours ahead of us, 2 hours ahead of us. So because of our scheduling, that she has to excuse. But I think our feedback can also goes back to her. And maybe before I begin, just want to also share, if you got question, you can scan the QR code, ask our colleagues, and I can also relay back to our panel. So maybe just a really quick question to Mike first, because I know Mike has been involved in one of the projects that Tammy mentioned with Michaela, the Phantasm in Tai Kok Tsui, right? So I think the project also give a little bit more background. Start with a very beautifully set idea where in urban development, we're not just marginalizing population or people relocation. This is not just or maybe one of the problem. Another issue we often encounter but not look enough is the species, the nature, and one of which is bird. And so I would like to ask Mike, like, what was your take when you first take on this project? Like when you talk to Michaela and when you work with her team, what was in your mind? And when you see those projections actually being realized, on trees. Yeah, can you share a little bit more?
We worked with Makala when I forgot, half years ago, right? Half years.
It's January.
January, yeah. And then Ian first told me this idea, and then I would say, oh, interesting that. But we actually your Makala original idea is projected into a piece of screen. It's mounted on the tree. Between the tree,
yes.
tree stick.
It's like a fabric.
Like a fabric frame in there. So that, but Hong Kong, we have a lot of policy, and then the LCSD not allow you to do this or do that. You cannot damage the tree. You are not allowed to blah 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 or what kind of things. A kind of yeah. So we have to balance between the artist's will. We respect with the idea and the method that she choose a lot of. She have different way of presenting her ideas. She can do sculpture things. She can why she select this method like projected on a screen inside a tree. So for the dying animals or animal in endangered more extinct species of animal, and then you already found someone to do the tree screen, but anyway, as they seems not allowed to doing this, so that we want to solve this problem, so that we use a very big projector, and which is very high quality of projector. Like the projector is super huge, it's bigger than this one twice. Huge. And then we have used a very strong light to put the species directly projected into the leaf, so that we and Makala have to select which tree the leaf is dense enough as a medium for the projection, because when say your haze or is not very high dense, and then you cannot have a medium for the projection to have her image projected on this. So that the final result that we both were very happy with this, and then the final result with some leaf, you can see a kind of three-dimensional image. So that you have a two-dimensional image, you project it in a three-dimensional image, you make the bird more lively into the public area for the community, and also her idea not just is visualized in the community of Tai Kok Tsui, and also the Sino more. They want this project. It's not just happen, and some people also they don't want to just happen once, so that they extend extend can the projection or period longer, so that we 2 or 3 weekend extend the project so that more people can see this work. And also one interesting thing is when we and Makila walk in the site of the from Sino the shopping mall to the community of Tai Kok Tsui, and you have 2 tree. It's like a Moonlong, it's a gateway to the Tai Kok Tsui, so that they exit from the MTR station and they see the 2 birds is like in the tree, and then they through this path. So this is very location oriented. So it's only happen in some specific location. And then so the people 放工 and then they after the dinner they walk back to the Tai Kok Tsui community. They can see the work, and also we pick up some spot. One is in the park, so the people take rest. They can see why the tree have some kind of 3D. You may think that because normal people will think that the image is not sharp enough, but it doesn't matter, because when he do the animation of the bird movement is already make people think that this is bird lively, and make it live in some in a specific location.
I also remember the team has done a test projection at the shop in the Tai Kok Tsui in Titsu Gai. Right,
Absolutely.
and if people are interested, you can also see it in the Tai Kok Tsui video website. And I remember Guy Fong really just trying to interact with
Try to interact with the
with a moving how to say in Su Hong in English,
Koala.
Koala, yes, koala. A baby koala and a mother koala, right? Very cute. Animated happenings, like little pleasant surprise that you find in the streetscape of Tai Kok Tsui. So it's a very poetic work as well. So maybe now also may I invite Thomas. Thomas, I know you also works along the line, or even you don't see a line already, like you're an artist, a great architect, and also teachers, and also all sorts of role. How do you see this kind of art can be a strategy, or can be like the value of having this in urban planning or just urban landscape? What's the value of having this happening?
Several weeks ago, one of my group of students, they decided to host an event in Japan, in Spain, and they were looking for a particular type of characters. It's men that retire and they look at construction site. And they would make judgment, like, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. So there's something about these type of artists, I guess, making comments in here. And I also, there's a term called spezzatura in Italian, where it describes people who will walk around, they wear the best suits in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, they walk around the square to be seen and also to be viewed, right? So they have this particular, and for me, those are great public arts, because they describe a particular timing event, and that's why I think about this strategy was for that particular time is that between 6 o'clock to 7:30, where everybody would pass through this particular area, expecting there will be an event that comes through. So I think the strategy, how to deal with this time base, and especially there's probably many criteria where you have public space, they don't like to be not lit, and you're trying to find a place that's not well lit. And so it becomes a double whammy situations where there's a kind of logistic of the cities, and where these work comes into here. Yeah, so when Ian mentioned about this ecology and bird, and I remember 2 weeks ago, Hong Kong, you had this bird singing contest, right? And I thought this was part of the same project. I said, brilliant. And I thought the idea if perhaps the publics have this certain type of hobbies, and non-artists become artists in a way that kind of delineate what you described this line, this interesting lines in here. As much as the performer become performer, but the audience become the performers in here. And that's why spezzatura and this passeggiata really describes this kind of area of these men looking at construction site in the mind thinking that this is how you should do it.
Great, thank you. I think both of you, just to echo on Tammy's point, public art, like we've been talking about from the morning, art and culture, its value in planning. But I think in this section particularly, we highlighted it could be very formless. And also, Thomas has greatly highlighted the factor of time. If we elongate the timeline or put it into, or like what Mika was saying, break down this hard-to-bite policy into smaller bite, this could actually be a very good strategy also to empower non-artists, non-art to be art and really living it in their daily life. Just to follow up on Mike, I just wanted to ask you about, because I know you and your company team, you often encounter or opportunity that you could activate, like almost like art hacking, art attack. You project things on facade, on street, on wherever. Do you see this as a good way? Like, can Hong Kong also enjoy this type of nighttime vibrancy where you go to a certain way and then you exit the MTR, you'll be greeted with rows of animated projection to escort you home? Do you see this as a picture?
Yeah, of course. I always imagine I make a trolley, small trolley, like the Yudan, the fishbowl one. And then we have a projector, and then we have the content, we have the speaker things, and then you just like, actually it's just like graffiti. It's a street art, it's normal. And then we proposed this idea to Makila also. Yeah. So it's like you walk, because nowadays the battery, the things, you can make the projections movable. It's nowadays technology. But for 5 years or 10 years ago, it's not too really feasible for doing this. For now, it's okay that I remember one of the LV, is it a work? It's like graffiti in this projected in a wall, something like this, so that we can see that. I like your term hacking. It's always my art teacher tell me, today you are an artist. You have to hack every day. No matter you hack the system for funding, or you hack what's the curator thinking to talk to you, and then you do other things, or no matter what, you have to hack. No matter it's a system, or you have to do your work in a more liberal way, something like this. Yeah.
Thank you, and also just to also follow on Thomas' point. I think what you mentioned about the bird singing contest and what's just we saw in January in Tai Kok Tsui, one similarity, and also from what Tammy was sharing, almost like a ritual of celebrating the passing of nature. All these activities or process, it doesn't seem to cost much. Like, I mean, it seems you can afford it, right? If this is an occasion, what would you say to encourage students and potentially developers and also stakeholder policymakers to embrace more creativity thinking or arts and cultural activity in the formal work process?
Oh my God, that's really hard, because the more you formalize, sometimes it leads always to bad examples in here. But maybe perhaps thinking, because also when we start to think about arts, there's always kind of the objectness about it. And I was just talking to a colleague who is a historian on cultures and technologies, and he taught a class last year is about things, objects. And then this semester, he realized it's not possible in Hong Kong to read at things. Then he decided to call his class stuff and matter. And I was thinking, what's the difference between that? Is perhaps things and objects are very countable. You can measure by it. You could count how much quantity there is. But stuff, it's a mess. But sometimes you feel the quality much more, the essence. Maybe when Tammy describing a particular poetry by Li Bai, and Li Bai describes about stuff, not so much objects. He would describe the effect of wine, wine affect how he lives every day. And it really describe about a particular time period. And if you want to describe about if we understand that art is an experience, and that experience is embodied, kind of like John Dewey, then we might be in that area of consciousness. And if we think of too much of the object base, which predominantly has a very definitive outcomes, and the stuff is actually the area, I think, in this time, it really, really matters. And I think that stuff also including the hacking, because there's not infinite materials to describe it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't see any particular question from the floor. So maybe allow me to wrap up our section just now. I think what struck me in what Tammy was sharing in the last project, particularly the big anxiety, where a project or a society is named with a specific issues that concerns all. And I think art project, or no matter what project that Hong Kong mostly that I see and encounter, we often tend to hide it or not talk about it. But what I see from Tammy's approach, or at least what I see from Australia, is they put it out and they address it. And I think art is a most powerful, not only beautiful way to tackle all of that at once. And I think we just all need to, like what Thomas was just saying about John Lewis, I also really loved his work. We all just need to allow ourselves more time and buffer to absorb in and have an aesthetic response, and to allow our aesthetics to flow. That would help us to make the right decision for the future. And thank you so much for all of your attendance. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tammy. I'll just hand over the time to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all our speakers, for this insightful discussion. Please be seated and join our audience on the floor.